day was a victory. But for me, this was personal because I remember exactly where this started. I watched what was happening in Texas. Republican legislators blocked by Donald Trump and MAGA extremists trying to rig the system before voters ever had a chance to speak. And I watched those Texas legislators take a stand, even leaving their state to stop that power grab. I stood with them because what was happening in Texas wasn't just about Texas, it was about the rest of the country. And I said right then and right there, clearly, if they start this fight, Virginia is going to finish it.
In this moment, where we have seen America's democracy threatened with erosion, with attack, it hasn't been by the people who built it. And in fact, the people who have been most threatened for its further demise have been the ones who've stepped up and stood in the gap. Whether that's Beanie Thompson on the January 6th committee, whether that's Letitia James as the Attorney General in the state of New York, whether that is Alvin Bragg as the DA in Manhattan, whether that's people like Louise Lucas. It has been people of color who have put themselves on the front line for America's democracy yet again.
The people in the 18th Senatorial District trust me. They saw my commercials. They believe what I was saying.
Your message to voters here right now.
My message to voters here is that they know me and they know when I make a promise that I deliver on my promises. I've been representing this community for 30 years. But I can tell you I'm going to be successful. And the reason is because the people trust me.
A few moments later.
The FBI, we have a warrant. Put out with your hands up, nothing in your hands.
SWAT teams in full force told people to come out of that shop with their hands up, arresting at least 3 people today. Sources say this is potentially connected to a corruption probe. And Senator Louise Lucas is the president pro tempore of the Virginia Senate. That makes her one of the most powerful figures in the legislature. I asked her about these raids. This is what she had to say.
I don't know what's going on. I just came from another boulevard, so I'm just going to wait until they tell me.
I want to talk to you about what's happening a few hours away. Senator Louise Lucas's home, our office rather, was raided by the FBI. At this point, do you stand by the senator or are you concerned? Because our sources are telling us this is about bribery and corruption.
Well, certainly I am aware of the law enforcement action that occurred in Portsmouth, and I am awaiting more details to become public before weighing in with any strong public comment. And as more information becomes available, I look forward to making further comment.
The FBI showed up to Senator Louise Lucas' office and cannabis dispensary in Portsmouth, Virginia, with a full federal presence, agents in the parking lot, handcuffs on people, a court-authorized search warrant in hand, and the kicker, just moments before that raid, she was on camera telling voters, "The people trust me. I deliver on my promises." That clip aged about 4 hours. It aged for 4 hours. Now, her supporters are out here calling it racism, calling it Trump targeting black women, calling it political persecution. And I get why that's the first instant. I do. But here's the fact that breaks the whole persecution narrative before it even gets started. ABC News confirmed this investigation opened up under the Biden administration, not Trump, Biden. So before we get any further or go any further, just sit with that. To understand why this raid matters beyond the headlines, you have to understand exactly who Louise Lucas is inside Virginia politics, because she's not some backbench legislator. She's not just some random state politician sitting in the background. She's one of the most powerful people in Virginia's government and holds the top leadership position in the state Senate. One of the most powerful positions in Virginia's state government. And she's held power in that state for over 30 years. That's not a career, that's a dynasty. And she operated like someone who knew it. Back in January 2026, when U.S. Senators Tim Kaine and Warner tried to weigh in on Virginia's redistricting fight, she posted publicly and told them she had the utmost respect for them, and then told them to stay in the cuck chair in the corner, unquote unquote, her words, and let her handle redistricting 10-1. She called the White House fascist in the same post. These are one of the most senior Democratic senators in the country, and she told them to sit down and be quiet. That's not someone who feels any pressure from above. That's someone who spent 3 decades building enough pool that she doesn't have to. And that matters because of what tends to happen when political power goes unchecked for that long. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just slow drift. The belief that the rules are written for other people, that oversight is something that applies to politicians with less leverage, and that the normal boundaries between public office and private interests don't fully apply when you've been in the room that long. That drift is where the real danger lives, and it's not unique to Lucas or to Democrats. It shows up wherever power sits in one place without serious accountability for decades. And here's what made this specific situation worth examining carefully, though. The community she's represented for 30 years came out to defend her the day of the raid. But before we get to the defending, I want you guys to hear the rhetoric in regards to what I just told you with Senator Louise Lucas telling the senior Democrat also within her state of Virginia to be quiet and sit down. Don't take my words for it, family.
Louise Lucas wrote this on January 16, 2026, and I quote, "I have the utmost respect for Senator Kaine and Senator Warner, but we do not need coaching on redistricting coming from a cuck chair in the corner. How about you all stay focused on the fascists in the White House and let us handle redistricting in Virginia 10-1. What the fuck? Oh my, she said to the senators. These are two incredibly powerful senators, one of which was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential nomination. We don't need coaching from the cuck chair. That's fucking crazy.
Sorry for the profanity, family. Now I also want you guys to get the remarks or the sentiment for the overall community.
Black folks, this is a story that we're going to have to highlight and push ourselves because mainstream media is not going to do that. I turned on MSN Now at the top of the hour as they went through the top stories for the hour. This wasn't even a top story to them, which is crazy to me. This story is a sign of the continued slide into authoritarianism. This president continued to go after people who challenge him, who challenge his authority, and also another attack on Black political power. The FBI raided the offices of Virginia State Senator Louise Lucas this morning. I'll repeat that. The FBI raided the offices of Virginia State Senator Louise Lucas. And I'm not even mentioning her title. She's actually the president pro temp of the Virginia Senate. And in case you missed it, she was the one who led the plan to redistrict Virginia to respond to the scheme in Texas and Florida and Missouri and a number of other red states. She's a Black woman who's 82 years old, who got in front of that camera and said, he don't put no fear in my heart. We are going to respond to authoritarianism, to fascism by playing their game. We are going to redraw. First off, we're going to take it to the people. We're going to have the people of Virginia vote. And if they support this, we will draw a new map. And they supported it, and they quickly drew a new map. And these folks don't like it. When you play their game, they don't like it.
So they're going after another Black woman. The office of Virginia Senator Louise Lucas has been raided for corruption. Now, this all has to do with redistricting efforts in Virginia. Senator Lucas led the charge to redistrict Virginia to give them extra seats in the House. We already know this has been happening all over the country, starting with Texas. They didn't even give their people a chance to vote. Neither did Louisiana. But after Virginians voted yes for the redistricting, of course, Republicans came in and asked the Supreme Court to block it. And right now, it's in a temporary hold. While all this was happening, Wiggs R Us said it was rigged. But he also knew if Virginia redrew their lines, baby, it was going to be a problem for him because the House would definitely be ours. And he can't let that happen because he knows if it is, he's going to be investigated. So now the FBI is raiding Senator Louise Lucas' office to find what? What are they looking for? I'm going to say this and y'all take it how y'all want it. White folks cheat because they know they can't win the right way. They've done this for decades. They find ways to use the system so they can stay on top because they know a fair election will put their asses on the curb. I'm saying white folks because white folks lead the charge on the Republican Party. Majority of them are good old Confederate boys. And the last thing they want to do is see anybody else on top or for minority groups to come together. And that is what's happening during these redistricting votes. And it's making them nervous. Telling y'all during the Civil War, y'all should have handled business.
I don't know what's going on, but the FBI just raided Senator Louise Lucas' office, y'all. Like, they came in like some roaches. They are all over there, swarm all over her office. But she just let them go on right on in there and got right in her car. The news people walked up to her, was asking her questions. They drove right off. Y'all, something is going on. and allegedly she has like a tobacco shop or something like that where they sell tobacco out of, but possibly it might be something else going down. But they do believe that the orange man has a lot to do with it, because he's going after everybody that's not in his political party. He's going after all the Democrats. The other day he was going after Hakeem Jeffries. So yes, y'all, Louise Lucas, the state senator in Portsmouth, Virginia, just got raided. FBI is everywhere. Y'all, it's not looking good. I'm not sure if she got it covered, but she does have a tobacco shop that people operate out of, and I don't know.
So there you have it, family. That were the individuals that came out to defend her the day of the raid. And one resident said something that stopped me cold. They said, Portsmouth has gone through so many trials and tribulations. The tolls, public safety issues, economic pressure. And then in the very next breath, they were defending the senator. Think about what that means. The community is describing real ongoing struggles that have existed across 3 decades of her representation, and the response is still unconditional support. That's not a knock on the community. Loyalty built on real moments like Lucas standing with the family of William Chapman after he was killed by Portsmouth police is genuine, or so to be, and that kind of presence earns real trust. But trust built on emotional moments can sometimes make it harder to ask the harder structural questions. Who's been steering the policy? Who's been voting on the budget? And who's been shaping the legislation that governs what those communities have access to? 30 years is a long time to hold power over a community that's still describing itself as going through trials and tribulations. The question worth asking is whether she cared. I'll give her that one. The question is whether anyone was actually checking what was happening on the business side of all that power, because that's exactly what this story goes, where this story goes next.
13 News Now at 4 begins with breaking news. I'm Janet Roach.
And I'm Connor Reel. There's a new development in today's FBI raid at the Portsmouth office of State Senator Louise Lucas. Sources tell ABC News that this investigation began during the Biden administration.
Yeah, it involves allegations of potential corruption and bribery tied to marijuana dispensaries.
Our crews have been in Portsmouth since agents got on scene this morning. Madison Schlegel is live there now. Madison, how is the community feeling tonight?
Concern is what we're hearing for Senator Louise Lucas from those community members who are watching that raid unfold today. For much of the day today, this parking lot behind me was filled with agents. And as you can see, those agents are still here doing much of that work, that investigating that they said was going to happen right here at Senator Louise Lucas's office and a business that was right next door. So this is the scene right now, but we want to show you what it looked like a little earlier, too. So we only saw federal agents here, no local law enforcement. So Portsmouth Police was here briefly today just to scan the crowd of bystanders, but those officers left a while ago. But what we have seen here are FBI agents in both Senator Louise Lucas's office and the cannabis outlet, which is right next door. So we know that back in 2022, Senator Louise Lucas announced that she was opening this cannabis shop up. But for those who are out here watching that raid today, they tell us that they came out here to support Senator Lucas and the work that she's done for the community.
We are definitely aching. The city of Portsmouth has gone through so many trials and tribulations. We have the tolls, we have things that are going on in the city, and the person that is here to try to represent us now, she is being federally investigated on something of allegations which we don't know of.
I'm actually the cousin of William Chapman, who got killed by the Portsmouth police. And Senator Lucas was the first one that stood behind us. So when I heard it, it broke my heart.
Now, some of those people that we've spoken with today tell us they saw the FBI put some people in handcuffs and took them away. We've reached out to the FBI to get more details on that, but they haven't been able to release any more information. On top of that, we've also reached out to Senator Louise Lucas's office to get more information or comment about this investigation. We've not yet heard back. Live in Portsmouth, Madison Schlegel, 13 News Now.
All right, family. So let's talk about what the FBI was actually there for, because two separate business interests got pulled into this investigation, and they are worth breaking down individually. The first is a cannabis dispensary that Lucas announced she was opening in 2022, located right next door to her Senate office in Portsmouth. Federal agents executed a court-authorized search warrant at that location, and sources say the investigation involves allegations of potential bribery and corruption tied to marijuana licensing. No charges have been filed. Lucas herself has been confirmed as the target versus the business. But a federal judge reviewed whatever evidence investigators brought and signed off on that warrant. That's important to notice, because they didn't just decide to raid her because they decided to raid her. Or a judge will have to sign off, as we know, within a legal process. So the threshold to walk through that door was already cleared. The second business is, as you guys can see on the screen, Lucas Lodge LLC. And this one raises a different set of questions entirely because Lucas Lodge is a Medicaid waiver service for people with disabilities and a medical transportation company. It's been Medicaid funded since 2005, as you guys can see on the screen right here. 2005, family. And online records list over $5 million in revenue. $5 million, okay, in revenue. Now, publicly available records also show over 217 violations here tied to the operation. There's one Google review, and the employees listed are primarily her two daughters, to be clear. All right. And to make matters even more interesting, because all of this is alleged, I want to put that out there. It's alleged. Has not been proven yet. We must wait until the process pan out and continue to play out within the legal system. But none of that is a charge, to be clear. Those are publicly documented facts. But federal investigators who look at Medicaid fraud cases know exactly what pattern to look for. Minimum visible staff, limited public footprint, high revenue flowing in from government programs. That combination is a flag itself, not a verdict, but it's the kind of flag that opens investigations. And that's actually the more important conversation here, because the cannabis dispensary is the flashier part of the story, but Lucas Lodge points to something structurally messier. Medicaid fraud has been a documented national problem for years, as we come to see, and we've seen it play out in multiple states, and the pattern is almost always the same. A business that looks legitimate on paper collects government reimbursements and operates with almost no verifiable activity to show for it. Whether that's what's happened here, we don't know yet. But the presence of 217 violations in a paper-thin public record on a company pulling in over $5 million from a government program is the kind of thing that warrants a serious look, regardless of who's running it. Now, step back and look at both businesses together, because this is where the structural conflict of interest becomes impossible to ignore. Lucas sits at the Senate President Lucas Louise office, right? Sits near it. That means she votes on Virginia's state budget, right? She's the top dog. She votes on healthcare policy. She has a direct role in shaping cannabis legislation. And at the same time, she's opening owns a Medicaid-funded business. You follow my drift, family? That receives money from the state healthcare system she helps regulate. And a cannabis dispensary operating under a licensing framework that her chamber helped write. That's not an accusation. That's just a description of the overlapping interests that exist right now, documented in public. The question of whether those overlaps cross any legal lines is for the courts, but the question of whether any sit-in legislator should be allowed to run businesses that are funded and regulated by the exact same government systems they vote on, that question doesn't need a courtroom to answer. It needs a conversation, in my opinion, and it needed one long before the FBI showed up with a warrant. Because when a person writing the rules also benefits directly from how those rules are applied, the incentive to write them fairly gets complicated in ways that no disclosure form fully fixes. ABC News confirmed it. This investigation opened under the Biden administration. That's not a talking point pulled from a conservative blog or anywhere out thin air. That's on air reporting from the news outlet that I showed you guys on the breaking story. So the moment someone tells you this is Trump using the Department of Justice as a weapon against a black woman who challenged him, you have one question to ask them. Then why did Biden's Department of Justice open the case? Because if the answer is that federal law enforcement can't be trusted when it investigates Democrats, that argument applies just as much to the administration that started this as it does to the one carrying it forward. You can't selectively trust the FBI only when it investigates people you dislike. The political persecution framing only holds if you ignore that single fact. And a lot of people screaming about it on social media are doing exactly that, ignoring it completely because it breaks the narrative before it has a chance to land. And look, I understand the instant. There's a real history, of black politicians and activists being targeted by federal law enforcement in this country. That history is documented. It's serious. It deserves to be taken seriously. But invoking that history requires honesty about the specific facts of the specific case in front of you. And the specific fact here is that the administration of the first black president opened this corruption probe. That doesn't fit a clean story about racial targeting, so it gets left out. Because whether you look at it, the Biden administration, Barack Obama, went hand in hand. Obviously Joe Biden was vice president first, and then he became president later, but he was vice president alongside Barack Obama. And there's also a consistency problem that cuts deeper than just this case. Because it tells you how long did the Democrats know from within their own party as an open this investigation to a Democrat in their own political party. For years, when conservatives argued that the Department of Justice was being weaponized against political opponents, they were told that was a far-right conspiracy theory with no basis in reality. And now the second the Democrat faces federal scrutiny, the exact same playbook gets run. Same language, same framing, same immediate assumption that law enforcement action equals political persecution. Either the Department of Justice can be weaponized against political opponents, in which case conservatives were right to be concerned, or federal investigations carry institutional legitimacy and we should let them run their course. I prefer that one no matter what political aisle you're on. Picking one standard for your side and a different one for everyone else isn't a political argument. It's tribalism with extra steps. The federal judge who signed off on this search warrant applied the same legal threshold that applied to every other high-profile federal search warrant in recent memory. People on the left made that exact point when the warrant for Mar-a-Lago got challenged. A judge reviewed the evidence and said yes, so the legal process was followed. I'm being very objective on both ends. That logic doesn't expire based on the party affiliation of whoever office is getting searched. A signed warrant is a signed warrant. The standard either matters or it doesn't. And right now, a lot of people are discovering that their commitment to that standard was always conditional who was on the receiving end of it. The community reaction in Portsmouth tells you something important, and it's worth treating with care rather than dismissing. People came out to that parking lot because their support for Lucas is rooted in something real. The resident who mentioned she stood with the Chapman family after William Chapman was killed by Portsmouth police. That's not manufactured loyalty. That's a person who showed up when it mattered personally, and communities remember that. The emotional bond is earned and it's legitimate, and nothing about this investigation automatically erases it. But there's a difference between honoring that loyalty and letting it replace the harder questions. The same residents defending her outside that parking lot were describing a city that's still struggling. Tolls, public safety, economic pressure, ongoing instability. Those aren't new problems. Because she said the person now is under a federal investigation that's representing us. Well, she's been representing you guys for 30 years. Those are conditions that have persisted across the same 3 decades she's held power. And the productive question isn't whether she ever did anything good for Portsmouth. The productive question is whether unconditional loyalty to a politician, any politician, is actually serving the people who give it. This pattern shows up in communities across the country, and it crosses every racial and political line. When political identity becomes the primary filter for deciding who deserves scrutiny, the people who pay the price are always the constituents, not the politicians. An elected official who knows their base will defend them regardless of what the facts say. What the facts say has no real incentive to perform. Symbolism becomes a substitute for results. Presence at emotional moments replace structural change, and the community keeps defending politicians or someone whose record, when you actually look at it, hasn't moved the needle on conditions they keep describing as trials and tribulations. That's not an attack on political representation. That's just an argument for demanding more from it and not less. Actions, right? Actions matter more than words. Execution. You could talk all day, but that don't mean you've done anything, or you may have done the bare minimum just to get by, just to give on an impression that you care. So the bigger structural issue here extends well beyond Lucas specifically. Right now, there's no federal law that prevents a sitting member of state legislature from owning businesses that receive government contracts or Medicaid funding in the same policy areas they legislate. There are disclosure requirements. There are ethics rules, but disclosure is not the same as prohibition. In filing a form that says you own a government-funded business while continuing to vote on government healthcare budgets is not the same thing as actually resolving a conflict. The form just makes the conflict visible. It doesn't eliminate the motivation to exploit it. And when the same person voting to fund and regulate a system also personally profits from how that system operates, that incentive structure is broken in a way that paperwork alone doesn't fix. That's the conversation this case should be forcing. And it's a conversation that has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. Whether Lucas is ultimately charged, whether charges stick, whether she's fully exonerated, none of that changes the underlying policy question. Should any sitting legislator be legally permitted to own businesses that are funded and regulated by the exact same government programs they vote on? Because if the answer is yes, then the Lucas situation is an anomaly. It's not an anomaly. And every situation is situational when it comes to federal investigations. You can't put them all in one as a monolith. It's the future of a system that tolerates this kind of overlap by design, and it will keep producing these headlines until someone decides the disclosure-only model isn't enough. No charges have been filed, and no one should be treating this investigation as a conviction. That's not how the system works, and it's not how we should talk about it. But the conflict of interest question sitting underneath all of this doesn't need a verdict to be worth answering. A politician who votes on healthcare budgets while collecting Medicaid revenue, $5 million, as I showed you guys in this post right here on the screen, while running a dispensary, that's a structural problem, whether or not a single charge ever lands. The same people who spend years demanding accountability for Trump's business entanglements owe this situation the exact same standard, because consistency is the only position that actually means anything. Drop your answer in the comments. Should elected officials be legally barred from owning businesses funded by the government programs they legislate? I want to see where people land on that. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next on this one, because this story isn't close to finish. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate. I'll catch you in the next one, family. I hope you guys got some value from this video, let alone having a productive conversation. I do believe, in my perspective, term limits should be given. Also, that you can, it's a conflict of interest, because then it doesn't allow the politician to actually be for the people, because it sort of misconstrued things for them to be objective and blur the lines, because then if they can benefit from it when they're no longer in office and having a government funded program where they receive $5 million in Medicaid, I don't believe that should be acceptable. I don't believe you should be able to do business while you are working for the government at the same time. All right. Now you can have investments, but at the end of the day, when it comes to government funding, use your own money if that's the case, that American taxpayers are already paying you as a politician salary-wise. You get a salary on top of your business being funded through Medicaid, and only allegedly your 2 daughters is working for the company only. With this big enough disability transportation staff, you got to have more drivers and support than that. But I'm going to leave it there, family. Catch you in the next one. Sorry to go on a tangent. Peace.